Hey everyone, welcome to Chicago Tonight. I'm Brandis Friedman. Here's what we're looking at. How the candidates for mayor differ on their plans for addressing a staffing crunch at the Chicago Police Department. Where the race for mayor stands as the campaign enters its final week. A peek into our conversation with two brothers exonerated for a crime they didn't commit who say they're still awaiting justice. Taking a flight to your actual flight? How travelers could soon cut down on their commute to O'Hare.
Reading is fundamental.
And a local nonprofit opens its third location, a decision they say was bound to happen. And now to our top story tonight. Mayoral candidate Paul Valles promises that hundreds of police officers who resigned or retired will return if he is elected because of the promise of new leadership. But similar efforts by city leaders across the country have fallen short. And law enforcement analysts tell WTTW News reporter Heather Sharon there's no evidence that Chicago will be any different. And Heather joins us now with more. Heather, first, let's listen to what Valles has been promising.
So I know for a fact that there are hundreds of officers that'll come in.
Okay, so what is he basing this promise on?
Well, he helped negotiate the current deal for the Fraternal Order of Police Lodge 7, which represents the rank and file of officers. And he says he got to know them during that process, and he's confident that they want to return to Chicago. And he says that he's offering new leadership, and that will be enough to bring them back into the fold.
So Chicago Police Department has a new policy that just went into effect that could expedite that effort. Give us those details, please.
So that policy was negotiated with the police union. It went into effect on February 27th, but announced today. That would allow officers who are younger than 50 and left in the past 3 years to come back on an expedited basis. Now, it will still take between 2 and 6 months to bring those officers back, but there's clearly an effort by the Chicago Police Department to solve its staffing crunch, which has led to tens of hundreds of millions of dollars in overtime by bringing these officers back.
Of course, and you reported earlier this
Yes.
week on that overtime. You also looked at efforts in other cities to bring back officers who have left, and you talked to some experts on policing in Chicago. What did you find?
So in Portland, Oregon, which had a similar staffing crunch, 81 officers were invited to return. Only 2 expressed any interest. In Los Angeles, there's an effort backed by the new mayor, Karen Bass, to bring back 200 officers, but the police union told the Los Angeles Times that there was very little interest in it. A similar program in San Francisco has only brought back retirees to sort of patrol the downtown commercial business area, but not with police powers, just with walkie-talkies and overdose medicine.
Okay, so Valles, he's facing Brandon Johnson in the April 4th runoff, as we know, a little more than a week away. What's his take?
So Brandon Johnson is really the only candidate running for mayor who has not committed to hire as many officers as quickly as possible. Instead, he wants to focus on promoting 200 officers to detectives and to set them to solve crimes, like the series of missing women from the Chicago's south and west sides. He says that Valles' proposal is ridiculous and won't actually happen, even if he's elected.
Ridiculous, that was his word. Lots of words getting thrown about in this campaign. Heather Sharon, thanks so much. We'll see you later.
Thanks, Brandis.
And you can read Heather's full story on our website. It is all at WTTW.com/news. And now to some of today's top stories. About 40 vendors at the Little Village Discount Mall will have to vacate their shops after all. A Cook County judge denied their request for an emergency injunction that would have prevented the vendors' eviction. The group had sued, asking a judge to rule the vendors are tenants who have rights under a lease agreement and not week-to-week licensees. The judge ruled the vendors' agreements with PK Mall, Inc. did not satisfy the legal checkpoints to be considered a lease. An attorney for the group says they intend to keep fighting. Students at Chicago State University may miss a few classes if faculty walk off the job in just over a week. The union representing faculty and staff at the university have filed a 10-day intent to strike notice with the State Educational Labor Relations Board, meaning a strike could happen as early as April 3rd. The CSU chapter of the University Professionals of Illinois represents 160 employees and says negotiations have gone on for over a year. At issue are workload and compensation. The university says it is committed to negotiating a fair contract and that it's waiting for a response from the union after offering an economic proposal. There's more of this story on our website. Naturally, since it's officially spring, snow is in the forecast for the weekend, just in time for the city to meet its newest snowplows.
starting with number 7, Jean-Baptiste Point du Shovel. Come on out, don't be shy.
The creative Chicagoans who won the city's snowplow naming contest got to meet their plows today. Other names include Salter Payton, Sears Plower, and Mrs. O'Leary's Plow. The Department of Streets and Sanitation had to plow its way through 17,000 responses in the naming contest to see which clever names stuck like snow.
Forgot about it. I was working and I did it. I think it was at midnight, and then my wife was upset. She's like, "Oh, you didn't tell me." So I didn't even vote for myself. So so I'm just kind of surprised as everybody else is.
Yeah, I told my parents after I won, most people are naming kids. I'm naming a snowplow. So that's where we're at right now.
Clever bunch. The Department of Streets and Sanitation says that the snow that is expected tomorrow, which National Weather Service says may be 2 inches in the city, that the plows will be out tomorrow. Coming up in the program, Election Day is less than 2 weeks away. Which mayoral candidate's messaging is resonating with voters? That's right after this.
Chicago Tonight is made possible in part by Alexandra and John Nichols, the Jim and Kay Mabey family, the Polk Brothers Foundation, and the support of these donors.
The latest poll shows Brandon Johnson within 2 points of Paul Valles in the mayoral runoff race. And with the election less than 2 weeks away, both candidates are making their final pitches to voters. Joining us to share his insights on the race is political speechwriter, debate strategist, and senior lecturer at Northwestern University, Jason DeSanto. Jason, welcome back.
Thanks, Brandon. It's great to be here.
So polls show the race now appears to be about neck and neck. What is your sense of the race right now?
That seems about right, and if we're to believe that poll, at least directionally, it's correct. It's been tightening up. I think both candidates have some things to feel good about in the way that they've consolidated their vote. Obviously, Valles was the leader after round 1, but he's been able to pull a pretty fair share, if those numbers are to be believed, of Latino votes, also holding on to a little progressive vote. And Johnson has essentially doubled his vote total, picking up a lot of African-American vote and progressive vote, and that's put him right into the race.
So Johnson, he's gaining more progressive voters following the endorsement, of course, that he got from U.S. Representative Jesus Chuy Garcia. How much value do you think endorsements have? Because every day I'm getting multiple releases from both campaigns about all the endorsements they're picking up.
I think the importance of endorsements are mostly at the margins, but since we're dealing with a race that is at the margins, they could have some impact. We think about endorsements, we think about fundraising off of the endorsement, we think about organization as being an important part of an endorsement, and also the idea that you can take those endorsements and articulate that you have broad support. And that's really what both candidates can do here. They have gotten endorsements across the political spectrum from different voter blocs, different ethnic groups, different racial groups. That's important for them to say that they're appealing to all Chicagoans. In the closing week, the real importance is going to be on the ground, and that's why we're looking to see who's endorsing them now.
So Valles vote concentrated in northwest and southwest side of the city. Johnson's on the west and south sides. What we're seeing right now with polls specific to race, Valles leading with roughly 72% of white voters to Johnson's 20% of white voters. Johnson flipping that, leading with roughly 74% of black voters to 16% for Valles. Neither candidate seems to be picking up a majority of Hispanic voters right now. What does all that tell you?
Well, it tells me that race, perhaps not surprisingly, in urban politics matters. And we can have all kinds of theories about why that is, explicit bias, implicit bias. We can imagine that in some cases people really are scrutinizing the records carefully. Let's stipulate that it is a factor. But also what you noted there is that both of these candidates are not sweeping completely on either side of the spectrum, racially, ethnically, and they both are making inroads into the Latino community. And what that means is they have to put together a multi-ethnic coalition, a multiracial coalition. And what that tells us is that race is a reality, but it's not destiny. You've got to be able to appeal to a lot of different kinds of voters. They're both trying to do that now. Lori Lightfoot is a good example of someone who did that. Even Rahm Emanuel, Richard M. Daley, they had to have support from across the political spectrum. We know here that it's a little bit of a different choice than it's been in the past few elections, but still in this case, they are working hard to gain endorsements and support from across the spectrum and from across the city.
So campaign remains almost exclusively focused on crime, with candidates having wildly divergent proposals to solve the problem, of course. Here's a listen.
So this whole idea that somehow we're going to promote detectives and that's going to solve the problem, it's going to do absolutely nothing. I know for a fact that there are hundreds of officers who will return if there's new leadership.
Paul believes that people are going to come off of retirement and come back to work after serving 25 plus years. That's ridiculous.
So crime, of course, seems to be the preeminent issue for voters in this election. What might some of the other issues be outside of that?
Well, I think education is one of the other key issues. And of course, it's a key issue because we want kids to have a good education. We want to feel like we're living in a city in which kids have the opportunities that every other kid has, no matter where they grow up. That's a given. But the other thing that the candidates are doing here is using the education issue as a proxy for attacks on each other's leadership abilities and their character. So Valles is going after Johnson saying, sure, you've been a teacher. What you've really been is a paid representative of the Chicago Teachers Union. You're not going to be independent. And I want the voters to know you're not going to be independent. Conversely, what Johnson is saying about Valles is he has failed everywhere that he's been as a school administrator. And oh, by the way, he's not telling you that he's going to raise your taxes. And the reason that he has to do that is because of the way he ran the schools the last time around. So he's failed and he hasn't been honest. So they're using that issue for the substance of the issue, but also as a way to talk about leadership more broadly.
Something for voters to listen to. Been a lot of debates in this race. What are some of the impacts of those? Do you think they're having an influence on voters?
Well, let's face it, most people are not going to tune in to every single debate. They might tune into one or two of those debates. I believe that if they've watched the debates in the last week or so, they've seen actually pretty good debates. And I say that as somebody who is concerned about democracy, but also as somebody who prepares debaters for campaigns. We have two candidates who are getting better and better, and by better I mean they are figuring out what their opponents are saying in a way that they can counter that might be persuasive to people. For voters, that's important, but also they're finding out the differences on the issues. That last clip that you played there is Johnson and Valles really arguing about the reality on the ground of what they've each been using as talking points on crime all the way through. Is recruiting 200 detectives or elevating them going to leave the on-the-ground beat cops at a lesser number? If so, maybe that's not what we want. Conversely, Johnson's saying about Valles, really, people who've been serving for 25 years and retired are going to come back. I mean, those are very specific questions. There's very little spin there. Those are just simple, logical appeals, asking people to think about what's the reality here. And on that crime issue, they're using that. I mean, Johnson in particular is again using that as a way to go after and question whether or not Valles has been honest. And Valles is using it to question whether or not Johnson's being realistic and practical.
20 seconds left, Jason. With these two candidates being so different, what's the likelihood that there are still some folks out there that haven't made up their mind yet? Early voting has already started.
Well, if we look at those numbers that you were touting at the beginning of this newscast, there's about 15 or 20% of the people who say that they're undecided. That's a possibility. Most of those people, I would estimate, are probably along the lakefront. They're the people in the last week that Johnson really wants to continue to peel off, and Valles really needs to hold on to if he's going to get himself to a place where he wins the race.
Week and a half until the big day. Jason DeSanto, we will be talking again between now and then.
Thank you,
so
Brandis.
much, of course. Up next, a new and faster way to get to O'Hare Airport. We show you right after this. Catching a flight in 2025, your commute to O'Hare might look a little shorter. That is, if you're flying with United Airlines. United is partnering with Archer Aviation to provide flyers an air taxi service from Vertiport, Chicago on the near west side to O'Hare Airport. The flight is expected to take about 10 minutes, and that's a lot less, of course, than the time many of us know that it takes by car. Here to discuss a potential new air service is Joe Schwieterman, a professor of DePaul University's School for Public Service who specializes in public policy, transportation, and urban planning, and of course our go-to for these kinds of stories. Welcome back, Joe.
Thank you.
Is this kind of air taxi service becoming more common?
You know, in the last 6 months brought a frenzy of news about this, and 8 or so years ago, there was a lot of speculation this was going to happen, and we waited and waited. Now the news is coming out fast and furious. United's announcement, though, about the Chicago service, really makes clear that they're giving us specific dates they want it to start, types of vertical takeoff equipment they're going to use. So it's very exciting for our city, no doubt.
United says they'll be taking off from Vertiport, Chicago on the near west side. What do we know about this location?
You know, it's a kind of an interesting development. When Meigs Field closed, it had the heliports on the south end there where helicopters could land. We lost a downtown location. And with the noise, helicopters coming out of roofs just haven't really been feasible in our town. So there was a big push to build a facility for not only helicopters, but these new vertical takeoff devices. And the medical district really helped make this happen. So if you look just south of Cook County Hospital there, we have a beautiful small heliport that's waiting for this kind of technology. It's about a 9-10 minute ride, say, from the Willis Tower, but it's close enough to downtown that United sees some big potential there.
Are there any advantages to this aircraft being electric versus, of course, the more conventional aircraft like helicopters?
United is really trying to be a leader on the sustainability side with Scott Kirby pushing to use sustainable fuel, investing in electric airplane technology. And this is kind of a baby step toward that the first electric commercial planes will probably be these vertical takeoff devices. We think the first ones to be approved, one of the Archer models they're talking about, may only have room for 4 or so passengers, but shortly after that, we're going to see bigger takeoff devices. These planes take off like a helicopter, then the propellers switch to more of a lateral mode, and they can travel at pretty good speed, like a regular airplane. And we're likely going to see planes in the 10 or 12 passenger range before too long. So United wants to be on the front head of the curve on that.
Still early on in the process, though, but the one thing that United and Archer didn't mention yesterday was the estimated cost of a fare from the Vertiport to O'Hare. What can we expect?
There's a lot of questions here. There is some talk it could be the $100, $150 range, which actually sounds pretty reasonable when you look at what a helicopter ride will cost you if you want to go visit New York by helicopter. The sense is that to make this model work, you really have to have multiple people on board, and 4 is going to be tough to make it work, paying for a pilot and so forth. A big question on the demand is going to be, where is it going to land at O'Hare? Back in the old days when we had Chicago Helicopter Airways, which operated from downtown and to O'Hare Midway, they landed on the roof of Terminal 2. It was fun when I studied that to go look at where they were. These, not so clear if they're going to land behind security, where you can do security before you leave, or you have to get in line like everybody else when you get to the airport.
And of course, do security before you leave. That's another complication, right? Because then TSA would have to be set up at the Vertiport as well. Joe, we know that the Kennedy Expressway construction will be full speed ahead by then. Do you expect that there's going to be a lot of demand for something like this?
The Kennedy Expressway is certainly going to test our mettle, you might say. And I think, the Blue Line is no speed demon getting out to O'Hare. So when you look at a flight, the flight itself is probably about 9 minutes. You have a great deal of predictability. And I think that's the big selling point on these is you can, if they do land behind security, have a plane that arrives, say, 30 minutes before your flight, and you'd be safely able to get to where you need to catch your plane. So I think there is going to be good demand. My sense is it's going to be corporate, celebrity, high-end travelers. The mainstream traveler will probably find just the need to, take an Uber to one location to jump on the Vertiport device to be more expensive than they're willing to pay. But United, I think, once they test this concept out, they're really interested in using these electric devices to go longer distances. So if this works, you could envision connections.
It could be the kind of thing where some of us are using it like an Uber if it's meant for us common folk to use as well, beyond just business folks and celebrities. Joe Streeterman, thanks so much. We'll have to leave it there.
Thank you.
And we're back with more Chicago Tonight right after this. Two brothers say they are still waiting for justice after spending more than 25 years in prison for a crime they didn't commit. In 1994, Sean Tyler and Reginald Henderson were convicted of murder after being tortured into false confessions. They were exonerated in 2021. Now, Tyler and Henderson are looking to clear their names by getting certificates of innocence. However, a judge recently told them they'd have to prove their innocence in court. We sat down with the brothers on Chicago Tonight Black Voices, where I asked what it means to them to have a certificate of innocence. Here's a preview of that conversation.
The certificate of innocence will allow us to finally go to our mother gravesite and tell her it's something that you've always wanted that we have that's here. It's two things you want to do, and that's you want to be right by God and you want to do right by your parents. And that's all we wanted to ever do.
And people don't understand, to be somewhat told that it's two levels of free is mind-blowing. To be exonerated, you believing that you're free. Only to go somewhere and they tell you have to be free 2 times in order to get upstairs. You understand what I'm saying? I'm going into a place where they telling me this for free people. I get in here, you tell me, no, it's another free you have to be. So again, we want the other free. I want to be fully freed. I want to be, not even to be treated, because that'll never be as far as being treated like you're free. I just want to know that I'm free.
And you can watch the full conversation Saturday night at 6:30 on Chicago Tonight Black Voices. A local nonprofit is celebrating the expansion of its literary reach with a new bookstore in Logan Square. Arts correspondent Angel Edo recently took us to Open Books to learn more about its newest Chicago location. Here's another look.
It's a really great way to be transported into a new world, and it's kind of hard in the current world, so it's nice to take a step back, take some time for yourself, and explore.
That's the mission of the Chicago nonprofit Open Books, to facilitate access to what they say is the basic building block to life's success.
Reading is fundamental. I mean, it's a saying that's been around for years, so I don't think I have much more to add to that. The simplest of ideas, to be able to have access to various spaces, to be thinking about all the little places where literacy and reading shows up. That's a huge focal point for us and why we stress the need for reading at all times.
Logan Square is the nonprofit's 3rd Chicago location. Now, the group set its sights on this area after learning many of their shoppers were commuting from the Northwest Side neighborhood.
I've always been a big fan of the West Loop location, and all I ever wanted was one that was closer to me. So it's my favorite bookstore in Chicago. It's the only place I get books. I just find it to have a really good selection, and I am a barista, so I have a small budget. So today I have Why Art by Eleanor Davis, which is my favorite comic artist. I also have Complete Guide to Print and Printmaking, as I am a printmaker.
Open Books says its donation model allows the organization to offer reads at cheaper rates than bigger bookstores. And despite the growing popularity of e-readers and tablets, Open Books says its intended target audience continues to show up.
We want people to be reading however they're reading. It could be old-fashioned magazines, it could be their tablet, it could be the recipe that they're reading with their children as they're cooking in their kitchen. So wherever people find things to read, we want to encourage those habits, especially within homes, and as it impacts children especially, so that they understand what reading and literacy means from an early age.
Their readers agree.
Having something more tangible, there's something about it that helps me connect more to it and retain, rather than looking at it in the screen.
What do you love about reading in general?
think it's more nostalgia. I used to hate it, thought it was more like a punishment when I was a kid, and now it just calms me.
For Chicago Tonight, I'm Angel Ito.
And you can visit or donate to any of the Open Books locations in Pilsen, the West Loop, and now Logan Square. And that's our show for this Friday night. Don't forget to stay connected with us by signing up for our daily briefing. And you can get Chicago Tonight streamed on Facebook, YouTube, and our website, WTTW.com/news. You can also get the show via podcast and the PBS video app. Join us tomorrow night at 6 for Chicago Tonight Latino Voices. Little Village residents are sounding the alarm after 2 women are found dead and a teenage girl is missing. And then at 6:30 tomorrow on Chicago Tonight Black Voices, 2 retired boxing champions reflect on their days in the ring. Now for all of us here at Chicago Tonight, I'm Brandis Friedman. Thanks for watching. Stay healthy and safe, and have a good night.
Closed captioning is made possible by Robert A. Clifford and Clifford Law Offices, a Chicago personal injury and wrongful death firm that's proud to serve its community through pro bono legal services.
Next time. During a chess match, one of the competitors dies.
Lab found significant traces of poison on the White Queen.
But the team can't figure out how the killer did it.
It was locked in the case all night.
And when a mysterious journalist shows up,
it's been such a long time.
She becomes an uncomfortable suspect.
I need to ask you a few questions.
I thought it was your voice I heard.
Death in Paradise.
Saturday at 7 on WTTW.
On Frankie Drake Mysteries.
Florida Jack, he called himself.
Frankie and Trudy's moms are the victims of a scam.
I might have dipped into the family savings.
Frankie's old friend, a former gangster, agrees to assist them.
Joe is going to help us get the money back.
And as the team works the case,
look at this.
Nora doesn't trust their new ally.
That guy is playing Frankie like a fiddle.
Frankie Drake Mysteries.